My name is David Jones. I'm head of the maths department at Grass Royal Secondary School in Yeovil, and I came here about 18 years ago from a central school in London. In 1965, Yeovil was selected as a pilot area for Nuffield mathematics, and I went on a course to learn something of this new approach to maths teaching. The concept was a logical continuation of Nuffield methods widely adopted in primary teaching. Instead of plunging into abstract maths at 11 years old, children go on doing practical creative work. At Grass Royal, we have about 400 pupils drawn from the local primary schools. Ours is an old-fashioned building, laid out for pre-war requirements, I suppose. That means a lot of smallish classrooms and one big hall, which is used for morning assembly and dinner at midday. I was sold on the Nuffield Maths approach in principle, but could already see the problems. Group teaching was desirable but awkward to arrange. Then the head suggested we should use this hall space for a large maths class, taking a whole year together at a time, about 100 children. This would help counter the bad effects of streaming children off into A, B and C forms according to ability, after which they can't have much contact with each other's work. It would also solve some of the timetable juggling that seemed necessary to apply the Nuffield approach. So every Tuesday and Thursday morning after assembly, the hall is cleared of chairs. Dining tables are set up as working surfaces and arranged for groups of 3 or 4 working together. The children then bring in their work cards and fetch the equipment from the cupboards. To start with, a lot of time was spent very chaotically getting set up, though now we find it possible to get through in 5 minutes. It's still a far from perfect arrangement, especially with our very limited storage space. We have proved, though, that even under our makeshift conditions, this arrangement works quite well. The math staff, who were understandably a little hesitant about team teaching as a method, now find it exciting and stimulating, and the pupils really benefit from a concentrated spell of practical group work. The starting point for our work is the cards. At first we produced about 36, which subsequent experience and discussion have changed, and we think improved quite a lot. They're kept in racks and boxes for the children to help themselves, and they're grouped under topics, not graded according to difficulty. The children work on what particularly interests them, though we make sure that a variety of topics are covered and a theoretical time limit is imposed on each card.
Go get a multi-board. A minute. Some graph paper.
The child now works at his own pace, contributing to his own group of 3 or 4 children. As far as possible, he's with his friends, though we make sure that a group contains both bright and less able children. The bright ones help out the others, maybe even reading the cards for them to begin with.
And how many different ways can the members of your group shake hands? How many handshakes would there be if there were 4 of you? Let's see. Well, pretend there's somebody over there. Let's see. I'll shake hands with Alan. 1. I'll shake hands with you. That's 2. You shake hands with...
Now, what card have you got, John?
Oh, P4.
And how are you going to tackle that?
Oh, it's about handshakes. So we're going to see how many handshakes we can do for the number of people, it says.
Yes, well, how are you going to record it then?
Not that the group leader always turns out to be the child you thought was most gifted. Creative ideas can come from the most unexpected quarter. This, to me, is really one of the great rewards of the group system. You'll find children settling down to a card and working out for themselves valid mathematical ideas, quite possibly ideas you had never thought of raising when you set the card.
And then I can shake hands with Anonymous.
And you could shake hands with me.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's 6.
Yes. Now, what have you introduced another member into the party? Now then, how would you work that one out?
Given time, and at Grass Royal there are no exams for the first 2 years, given time, the children can go on developing their own ideas and, what's more, discover how various problems and solutions interrelate. That's really the purpose of the work record they keep. Folders stamped with the date on which they started and finished a particular card. The folders are signed by myself or whoever actually saw the work.
Page 17.
Oh, that's right, the area and the volume of the hall. Right, what units are you using for the area?
2 square feet.
That's fine. Right, what cars are you going to do now?
An M6.
Which one's that?
A traffic graph.
Oh, outside on a nice day.
Yes.
I thought so.
Children discover ideas you hadn't thought of when setting the card. Sometimes, though, the main points need bringing out a bit. So before approving the work, we'll take them a bit further by the question and answer method.
How are you going to find the surface area of one face? Right. How are you going to find the surface area of this face? And how many faces have you got?
6.
6. Fine. Now, are you worried about the volume? Can you work out the volume?
Yeah.
You can?
Yeah.
Right.
Can I have this length and length? Length for that. What?
In all, we have 5 40-minute periods of maths a week, 2 double periods and 1 single. The double periods are spent in the assembly hall. This gives the children a decent amount of time for using apparatus without clock watching or worrying about clearing up for dinner. In the single periods, the children are taught in their separate classrooms. Usually we work from the modern maths textbooks, but often talk together about those problems arising from their group work. Under these conditions, I find that my colleagues and I have stopped being teachers isolated in our own rooms. We move around amongst the groups in the assembly hall, and the children themselves are free to move if they need advice, or more likely, want to compare opinions. The children soon learn that we aren't infallible. We don't pretend to be. If they're not satisfied by one answer, they're quite likely to go to all 3 members of the staff. It's a bit disconcerting to start with, but we greatly prefer this independence of thought. The same with the noise level. I suppose it is higher now, but it's the pleasant noise of children excited by their work and giving it their whole attention. Regimentation has gone by the board, but concentration, I'm sure, has increased enormously, and with it, understanding.
Eliot's School, Putney, where I work, is a very big comprehensive school in southwest London. In June 1965, there were over 2,000 pupils, though nowadays it's down to a steady 1,800. I'm Richard Forshaw, head of the Maths department at Eliot, which every year gets 360 to 370 pupils from over 100 different primary schools, only 3 of which are local. Just imagine being an 11-year-old seeing this place for the first time. It must seem vast. It is vast, this sort of 1984 aspect of an enormous building with rooms going up to 176. The child is either terrified or becomes aggressive out of self-protection. So my first job is to bridge the gap between primary and secondary school teaching. To start with, I encourage them to pin up comics, pictures, models, and so on, so that the math room is a room in which they can feel at home. It's their own place. Then I also divide them off into little groups and let them loose on cards and worksheets. Mathematics, I think, is the solving of problems. These cards and sheets, which I started using 5 years ago, set the children practical work which they can tackle together. They can make discoveries.
You're allowed to turn any of the tumblers over, but you must turn just 2 at a time. Can you do this so that all 3 finish the right way up? Okay. All 3 over again. Not this one. No.
In ordinary life, we never tackle any problem on our own. There's usually a little team working on it. That gives a sense of reality and gets rid of any false awe about a problem which may not be a proper problem at all anyway.
There must be a limited number of moves we can make. No. of that when we started. It's impossible.
We have a small party, and for this party, Jack has brought 1 apple and 2 bananas. In the first year, you have to lay down a certain mathematical vocabulary, and this means you have to do some formal talking. We would like to record this. Now, how shall we set it down? Sure?
You put 1A to represent the 1 apple, and 2B to represent the 2 bananas.
Even in the more orthodox kind of class where I give one of my little lecturettes, the emphasis is on the practical. So I talk for 10 minutes, give a few examples, and then we get down to the worksheets and diagrams and illustrations. The children love these, and they help to integrate them into the work. That, by the way, is the great advantage your homemade stuff has over textbooks. You get a textbook and it has 1 or 2 pictures, maybe the odd joke. On his first lesson, the child looks at these, laughs, adds a few jokes of his own, and that's it. For the rest of the term, that book is just a thing with no more life than a doorstop. Whereas these Romeo sheets come along, each with their new crop of jokes and things to do, actually inviting the children to make their own additions. They learn by doing this and by helping each other to do it. And incidentally, the most unlikely children will sometimes come out with the most glorious mathematical ideas in the process. Of course, to a child in his first year, especially his first term, it may seem as if he's jumping about a bit from this to that. You can't link up too many things at once. But what he's doing, of course, is picking up the tools of the trade. We go up to this contribution, and up again to that contribution. And that has put on the diagram the information, a total of 3 apples, and up there, a total of 5 bananas.
That vector then represents the complex number 1 plus 2i, with displacement vector 1, 2.
These people now taking A-level maths, for instance, as soon as you mention anything of matrices or vectors, they can get started into it straight away. There isn't a look of puzzlement and a hard week's work before you can get an idea over. They know the language.
Is that vector there? A total displacement along the real axis of 3 units and along the imaginary axis of 5 units.
This, as you see, a total of 3 apples and 5 bananas. Right, corners on stations. Cedric, you're making the journey 1, 2, followed by 2, 3. So first, off you set on 1, 2. That's it, Cedric. Right, start off now, 2, 3. You remember best a real experience. You demonstrate, and then you get the children to demonstrate themselves how a mathematical pattern translates into actual situations, by no means confined to the classroom. Maths must escape from the classroom whenever possible. It must be something they can recognize in the normal world, where after all most of their lives will be spent. Good. Now give them a wave. Jolly well done. What's more, this is the kind of atmosphere where they quite naturally learn to ask things like, how many kinds of question are there? Does this question have an answer? Is this question a question at all? Or is it just gobbledygook? How long is a piece of string? How high does a mouse spin? What kind of question is that? Very important. It's this translation from syntax language to object language which is often the great stumbling block. It's what we're here for, to ease them over these really basic problems. Not so much as a teacher, but just simply as one more adult, cruising around, only a bit more friendly than he was during the old chalk and podium days. These children will learn maths together for the next 3 years until they're streamed off at GCE, CSE or social study groups before leaving. I believe there's no need to start cramming them at 11 for exams they must take when they're 16. There's plenty of time for that after the third year. By then, they should have grasped the various principles, having arrived at them through practical, creative work.